How you guys doing? I wanted to talk about something today that just broke, and it's some big news on the assassination of the one, the only Malcolm X. And he was a massively influential black human rights activist during the 60s before he was assassinated in 1965, which actually is going to be one of the main things we're talking about today. And that's his assassination, and now the alleged conspiracy of the NYPD and the FBI in regards to his assassination. So, just to add a little bit more about Malcolm X and his influence on me, I recently read the autobiography of Malcolm X, and it completely changed my worldview in regards to how I view race, how I view my place in society, and the solutions to what the white collective has administered horribly to people of color all over the world. And he really woke me up and made me realize how deaf, blind, and dumb I was throughout my entire life, not being honest in regards to the discussion about race and how serious and present the issue still is in regards to all these people of color, black people, brown people, red people, Asians, yellows, in regards to their struggles and how the white race has administered a painful, shocking treatment towards all of them that has put many of the people of those massive population groups in hellish, devilish, warish conditions. And Malcolm really showed me what life is like. Just, I mean, I'm never going to understand because I obviously am white, but he gave me a perspective that I'll never be able to forget, and a lens that I'll never be able to stop looking through in regards to race relations. Now, a big breakthrough was just announced in the case of his assassination. And for those of you who don't know, Malcolm was supposed to give a speech in the Audubon Ballroom in New York on February 21st, 1965. He was getting death threats. He knew he was being watched. He knew he was going to die. He said it before. He said his time was coming and he had a feeling that his death was imminent. And that just makes this even more haunting with the news I'm about to break to you guys in regards to his assassination. So, on February 21st, three men came out to the Audubon Ballroom, one with a sawed off shotgun, and two had pistols, I believe. When Malcolm was giving a speech, a scuffle began in the crowd. The next thing you know, somebody draws a gun, everybody starts running around. It's a whole mess. And while everybody's in this calamity, Malcolm gets shot repeatedly, multiple times by the gunmen, two of whom who got away, one of whom who was caught. Now, the one who was convicted, along with the other two men who were convicted allegedly of shooting Malcolm X, were sent to prison. Now, the one who was caught was of the name Thalmage Hayer or Thomas Hagen. Thomas admitted that the two other men who were convicted of killing Malcolm were not involved in the role and were not at the plans and the actual shooting. Yet the two other men that were convicted were sentenced to prison for 20 years. Eventually, more breakthroughs were made in the case in the 80s, and the other two men were let out. Okay. Now, Dama Chair, I believe, was also just released after 44 years, according to a story by CNN. And he was just paroled. And it's interesting to know that he is released. Didn't expect that, honestly. But okay, now let's get to the meat of the story. So, an undercover NYPD officer named Raymond Wood. This is an article by Reuters called Malcolm X's Family Releases Letter Alleging FBI Police Role in His Death. Raymond Wood wrote a letter before he died, stating that he had been pressured by his NYPD supervisors to lure two members of Malcolm X's security detail into committing crimes that resulted in their arrest just days before the shooting. Those arrests kept the two men from managing door security at the ballroom and was part of a conspiracy between the NYPD and the FBI to have Malcolm killed, according to the letter. Wood's letter states, under the direction of my handlers, I was told to encourage leaders and members of the civil rights groups to commit felonious acts. So basically, Raymond Wood was luring in the two men that were supposed to be guarding the door at the Audubon Ballroom to commit crimes that would indeed have them arrested. And because they're arrested, the shooters will have easier access to get into the ballroom and bring in the weaponry that they had. An undercover NYPD officer was working to perfectly set up the assassination of Malcolm X. Well, um, the letter still writes, or the article still writes, the NYPD said in a separate statement it has provided all available records relevant to the case to the district attorney and remains committed to assist with that review in any way. What amazes me about this is that we know J. Edgar Hoover and other senior officials at the FBI said to quote, do something about Malcolm X. And we obviously know what happened to Fred Hampton. For those of you who don't, he was a 21-year-old civil rights activist who was actually meeting with Southern Confederates and Puerto Rican rights activists and bringing together a rainbow coalition of the with the Black Panther Party to advocate for civil rights of all human groups. He was gunned down at 21 with a baby on the way. Police fired 99 shots into his room. Him and his fellows only fired one shot. These conspiracies and plans have all been so brilliantly planned by the officials at the FBI and the CIA and the NYPD that it literally just goes under our noses and we think that there's something else that's happened. And it's really just a rare event and rare chance that Malcolm happened to be at that theater. This letter exposes so much about the corruption that goes on within the FBI and the police state. And the fact that it's almost 65, 45, 50 years later, even more, uh, after the assassination of Malcolm X, almost 60 years actually, there's still breakthroughs that admit from an undercover officer that there was corruption and scheming in order to assassinate one of the most influential and up and coming brilliant minds of the century, because white folk thought he was dangerous and his words were going to harm the established status quo that had already perpetually pushed black and brown folk to the bottom of the food chain. That's what they're afraid of. That black people are actually going to start forming a coalition and achieve their rights, which they are guaranteed as human beings. They said no. Figure something out. Let's even get his security guards arrested so we can have an easier way to go in and sneak some shots on them. Now, this does not disregard the Nation of Islam, who also was working with Elijah Muhammad, and Malcolm X said they allegedly had plans to hurt him and his family. When somebody threw a firebomb in his house late in the evening, He didn't know who it was. He thought it was the Nation of Islam. And eventually, Elijah Muhammad has stated that they had no correlation and causation to hurt Malcolm or his family, and he denounces whatever happened, but we never know because in an organization that big, there's possibly a great amount of scheming that goes into killing somebody like Malcolm X, who challenges every established system that was already brought upon the economy and the social and political sphere. That's basically it for the story. Please read the autobiography of Malcolm X if you have the chance. Um, if you're white, educate your fellow white brothers and sisters on the struggles that African American and people of color, African Americans and people of color have to go through in our society and as a worldwide whole, because it's unfair, it's unjust, it's evil, and it's devilish. The amount of pain that these people and cultures have had to go through is unspeakable. So do your part, educate yourself, educate others, and let's hope that the case of Malcolm X's assassination gets a little bit more traction and we figure out exactly what happened to finally bring this case to a close, and hope that his words and his message does not go unmitigated and left behind. Thank you.